Welcome to Altar of the Demo Gods. If you're wondering what advice from two experienced sales engineers sounds like, it's a little like this.
Welcome back to Altar of the Demo Gods. I'm Keith Wilson, joined with my friend and co-host John Morton. John, how you doing?
Living that dream, Keith. I'm going to just use that as my go-to tag.
Living that dream. This is episode 5 of Altar of the Demo Gods. Last week in episode 4, we talked about cloud. So we talked about cloud services like selling cloud services, not just cloud services. SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, or infrastructure as a service, and on-prem. And if you don't know what any of that stuff is and you want to know, go listen to last week's episode where we tell you all about it. It was an interesting conversation. We reflected back on what the differences were between selling. I think we spent a lot of time talking about what the differences were between selling on-prem and SaaS, right? Because it's and compared the pros and the cons. I had a lot of pros for SaaS in terms of sales engineers. It made my life so much easier in terms of demos, just reduction of friction in the sales process and all that. And what were your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I kept reflecting back on my Hawaiian vacations in the on-premise days when life felt a little sweeter. But
yeah, that's right. By the end of that episode, you two will also want to take a vacation to Hawaii.
So yeah, I think SaaS, cloud world, in my opinion, has made SE's job a little easier from a tech perspective and all around. So, the net of it is there's a win there, but dollar values are a little bit lower. But, the win is not as much technical expertise required in the current age.
Yeah. So in the episode before that, in episode 3, we were talking about core competencies and personality types. And one of the things we talked about in there was sales process and understanding sales process. And a lot of that has to do with understanding sales frameworks, which is going to be the topic of today's show and probably many others too. But this is our introduction to sales frameworks. And John, I'm excited for this one because John's an expert, and at least in my opinion, an expert on
I've never labeled myself that way.
MedPick. on Medic and MedPick. Same thing. And I think that's going to be the framework that we discussed today. It's also going to be our acronym of the week.
The return.
So Medic, acronym of the week. John, what can you tell me about Medic?
All right.
Or MedPick?
So I always like to, people, I notice when people have been actively listening, remember, 2 ears, 1 mouth, to what John Morton says. They tend to repeat what I say. So I always say like the net of it. Whenever I say the net of it, it's like your paycheck, right? What did you actually take away? The net of it is that, sales is a lot harder than what people think. There's a lot more theory and science to actual selling. It's not just schmoozing, boozing, taking people out, buying them drinks, eating fancy dinners, and collecting money. There's way more to this. And Medic is one of those frameworks that demonstrates the science behind sales.
Yeah. What does Medic stand for?
Yeah, so Medic traditionally stands for, it's an acronym. And again, like I said, I learned under tutelage of a guy named John McMahon who kind of taught this at BMC. There's a whole lot of history behind it, but Medic stands for M, metrics, E, economic buyer, D, decision criteria, D, decision process, I, identified pain, and C, champion, which is a framework by which sales teams should operate.
I would almost look at this as I don't look at this as a comprehensive framework. I look at this as a discovery framework. These are the boxes that you should check for discovery. not just in the very beginning, although you should have a ton of these checked before you get to POC, but throughout the
Correct.
process. John, you may even argue that you should have all these boxes checked before you go to POC. So metrics, that means that we have identified the metrics that are important to the customer and how our product can help. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Am I?
Let's bring it
understanding
back
right?
one step.
There's more to it.
Let's
than that,
bring it
though.
back one
Okay.
step. So normally in sales, as whether a AE, account executive, or a sales rep, or an SE, solutions engineer, whatever they are, normally they operate as a team. You always have a quota. That quota can be, let's just use a base number of $500,000 of new revenue for the year. You have $500,000 to bring into your company for the year. You may own it in a territory, you may own it in a discipline, a vertical, right? You may have the Ohio Valley, you may have tech. Your goal is to bring in $500,000. What part of that is forecasting? Keith, I gave you a $500,000 number to come work here. How are you going to get to that number, right? So you'll say, I got these companies on my list. I'm going to go talk to them and sell them our product. We do things like quarterly business reviews, QBRs that help us get there. So why am I telling you all this? Medic, in my opinion, why I call it, a framework, is a way for Keith, rather than to say, you got to trust me, John. I signed up for 500 grand. I'm going to get it to you. He can articulate to me in a very specific way. Here's how I'm going to get to that number across these companies. So company X, I applied Medic. So to Keith's point, when I look at company X, these are the metrics by which they operate. They are in the business of XYZ. That's why they need our product. So that's kind of the M there of Medic in helping forecast the sales process for this, me getting to my quota.
And E, what'd you say the E was for again?
Economic buyer. Probably the most important thing.
Yeah, and it's such a misleading. It was a misleading term for me when I first heard it. It was the economic buyer. What does that mean? It doesn't make sense, right? Tell me what or who or whatever is the
economic so the
buyer.
Economic buyer is normally the person who, at the end of the day, actually signs the check on the purchase. Now, in enterprise, it's normally not the same person you're working with to make the deal, but in commercial, it can be, right? Economic buyer just basically means I have the authority on behalf of my company to purchase this product.
So they're the person who can sign off on the purchase order to buy it, or put in the credit card number to purchase it.
If I tell my assistant to go buy it, or I have the credit card myself, or I got to, do some sort of line item, they are the authoritarian on making the purchase.
Okay. And then the first D.
Yep. The first D. If you're getting more than one
the
D,
first D.
That's quite an experience. But the first
no one forgets the first D.
Is that's why I love working with you, Keith. We can cross these boundaries relatively simply. Decision criteria. For the most part, there is some sort of decision criteria by which, we're going to make a purchase. I made this example before. If you were buying your girlfriend and you didn't want your wife to know a minivan, you're going to go test drive that minivan and say, yep, it's suitable for my unborn, illegitimate child. That is part of that decision criteria. It has to have, seat belts and tires and safe enough to drive. So that's part of that decision criteria. What do I need to check the box to say, yes, this is what I need?
I think extracting that decision criteria from the prospective buyer, from the prospective customer, extracting that information is a skill in itself.
100%.
Being able to, because a lot of the times they don't know what their criteria is. Your customer has a wide variety of skills. So let's talk about security, just because it's what we know, right? So the guy that I'm selling to also has to know about firewalls, has to know about antivirus, has to know about EDR, has to know about SIEM, has to know about all these different security disciplines. When he gets to what I'm selling, he's talking to me and, 2 or 3 other vendors that sell the same thing that I am. He needs to be educated, or she needs to be educated on that space.
Right.
And they often don't know what they don't know. So how do you know what your criteria is going to be if you don't even know what's possible? So you have to inform them. You have to inform the customer and educate the customer of what's possible.
Yeah.
And know how to have a conversation with them to understand which criteria is actually important to them that matches up to their business metrics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. To put it a different way, right? So part of a decision criteria is using my example again of buying a minivan. You can go to the parking lot and you can say, I think I fundamentally know what I want. It needs to be a vehicle that moves people from point A to point B. It has tires, it's covered. And you show up there and you see a Ferrari on the lot. It matches that criteria, right? It has 4 tires. It can move a person from point A to point B. But is it the appropriate vehicle for moving your unborn illegitimate child from point A to point B? It may not be, right? So you got to understand what is the exact criteria that they're looking for to satisfy their needs. And sometimes they do need coaching.
Well, and if you're new to the world of minivans, you're not going to know. You may need features in that minivan that you wouldn't even know existed until you've talked to the sales
100%
rep.
correct. Yep.
Right?
Yeah, so decision criteria is actually pretty important, and we can cover this in another topic, but influencing that decision criteria is a critical trait that SEs need to know. How can I influence the success criteria when they go to make a decision? I help them along that path of here's what you actually need.
Okay. So decision criteria, that first big D came in the room and we talked about it.
Big D.
Now this big swinging second D comes in the room.
Just as important.
A second big D enters the room.
Just as important.
What is this? What's the second D stand for?
The decision process. So the decision process
Okay.
is a little different, right? So I was just recently in Vegas and my buddy was hanging out with me and he made this example. He said, John, hanging out with you, I feel like a rock star because, he used the Kevin Hart example of the way my bank account is set up is I can't just go to the ATM and withdraw $1,000 and go do the fun things you do, right? The decision process is I got to call my wife. I got to check the account. I got to make sure it's coming from the right account. So decision process is along those lines of before they've agreed, this is what I need to make this purchase. They've agreed the technical criteria is there. The decision criteria is there. What is the process? Do I got to route it through finance? Do I got to go through procurement? Do I got to do due diligence? The way my bank account is set up, I just can't drop that kind of money. So that's what decision process means.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you said economic buyer is the important one, but I'm going to contest that this next one, the I in medic, is probably the most important.
Oh, yeah.
John, what does the I stand for in medic?
I is number one, baby. You are correct, Keith. I means identified pain, right? So same scenario. Let's go back to my car scenario because it resonates. Everybody's bought a car. They might, I don't know, Gen Zers. I heard they take Ubers more than they buy cars. So nonetheless, we're trying to hit the mark. Identified pain means without pain, there is no deal. If I didn't have to buy a minivan for my illegitimate child, this scenario is going way too complex now. I feel guilty saying it. But if I didn't have that pain.
Your second family's not going to like hearing this podcast, John.
30 years from now, they're going to be like, man, that guy really didn't like the city. If you didn't have that pain, would you go buy a minivan? You wouldn't. You would not be in the minivan market.
No, you don't have a compelling reason to go buy one.
1,000%. Right? Somebody shows you a Ferrari, you might be like, that's cool. But you don't have that pain. So the pain is the driver to any sales deal. 100% definitively, I will go to my grave saying, without pain, there's no deal. You might buy in a science project, maybe. But as a salesperson, SE or rep, you're going to waste a lot of time, a lot of cycles chasing down a dream. If they have definitive pain, I need this minivan tomorrow, you will always have better, experiences.
Yeah, you have to understand what it is the customer is actually trying to accomplish. Why are they even out there looking at these tools to
100%.
begin with? Because if it's just because, well, I got budget to spend, well, okay, what's going to drive that urgency for your product, right? It's they you have to attach yourself to some sort of pain and how you can relieve that pain, because that's how you demonstrate value, right? Good example, podcasts. My pain is cutting up clips for social media. There are tons of new AI services now that will do just that for me.
Yeah.
Right? They will take videos, cut up and edit the clips for me. They are solving a pain that I have, which is I am losing time doing something I don't like doing. It is painful. It causes me pain. It actually does cause me internal pain, right? And they have a solution for it. I'm much more willing to pay to relieve my pain than I am to just spend money just because.
I like to think of it this way, Keith. Like, I don't even know the dates. I'm winging it here. I'm like on Ancient Aliens on History Channel right now. In the 1600s, some dude said, hey, let's take some flour, mix it with water, and bake it. And then we'll bake it again. And they were like, hell yeah, we got bread. And everyone was like, bread is amazing. And then some dude said, I don't like tearing up bread, man. I wish it came sliced up. And some guy was like, what if we just sliced up bread? And they sold it that way, as sliced bread. Dude, that pain of having to tear off bread chunks that created sliced bread was the best thing since sliced bread. Right? Without pain, there's no sale.
Well, I'll take it a step beyond that and say pain makes the product sticky, right? And in a SaaS world where subscriptions matter, you want the product to be sticky. If you're solving a pain point for me, it's a lot harder for me to get rid of your product because I'm afraid I'm going to have to face that pain again.
Facts, man. Best thing since sliced bread.
In my role as a day job, I know what it's like to deal with products that solve a pain for me, and I have to lose those products for whatever reason. Maybe I don't have budget for it anymore. Maybe whatever the reason is, right? Maybe I don't have that product anymore. Now I have to find a replacement to solve that pain because the pain's still there, right? So it definitely makes your product stickier if you can solve a pain for me. And I have other stuff that I just bought on a whim. It was cheap, and I was like, oh, I'll try it out. That stuff doesn't stick.
100% doesn't.
You get the first year out of me, congrats, and then I'm gone. And now you're experiencing churn, and churn after a year is great.
I love it. To that point, right? I love when it's like, I'm happy there's laws enacted that says, you have a renewal coming up for XYZ. And I'm like, what the hell is that product? I don't even use it. That thing's terrible. Right? And I don't renew it. So to your point, but if it's painful, I will absolutely, I'll be begging for access back to it, right? Solve that problem.
Yeah, if I have a product that was sold to me to relieve whatever pain I was feeling, and my boss comes to me and tells me, "Hey, I need you to cut your budget, start looking at your tools," I'm going to do everything in my power to keep that thing that is alleviating my pain, right?
That actually brings us to that last point, actually, of a champion.
What's that?
Right? So the champion.
Yeah, that's the C.
So that's the C in medic. So that's exactly what a champion does is, a champion, even though the economic buyer may not understand all the pains of the organization, right? The champion is saying, hey, man, this is my pain, right? This is a pain I personally have. I have influence and I'm politically aligned, and I want to make sure this product persists. I need this product to persist. I'm willing to go out of my way and introduce this salesperson who I don't know from Adam, who bought me a bunch of drinks and I got a DUI driving home that night, and I still like the guy. I'm going to introduce him to the EB because the pain is enough that I need to solve this problem. All right. So a champion is absolutely critical and an opportunity as well, where they're the ones with the skin in the game and need this win. So that's the last C in medic that really brings that point home.
I feel like we should almost do a whole episode dedicated to champion, if not the other ones. Not that it's any more or less important than the others, because I still think identifying pain is the most important. I think identifying a champion is often the biggest problem that sales reps and SEs make, is they don't identify, or they misidentify.
A coach versus a champion in John McMahon's methodology of medic is the biggest point. We can have a whole topic on that. What is a coach? What is a champion? Just remember, a champion will always get you to where you need to be. A coach will give you information, but a champion will. Excellent point, Keith. I don't want to beat it up here, but yes.
A champion's the one who has influence with the economic buyer. I always want to go executive buyer, economic buyer, exactly. Right? I know, like, for me, I have been the champion for several products. My boss is the economic buyer. If he says yes, then we buy it, right? But if it's a product that I'm using that's for my department, and I've told him I've done my due diligence, this is what I'm going to do. This is the relationship I have with the vendor. It's truly the champion that's making this decision, right? Because I'm putting my reputation on the line. I've done the research. I'm alleviating my pain. I'm expressing that pain to my economic buyer, my boss. And that's a trusted relationship, right? I've worked very hard to build a good reputation with my boss. And I have certainly been the champion in a lot of things. You want to know the quickest way to blow up a sales deal with me is mess around with my relationship between me and my boss.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm gonna cut you out.
Make me look like an. Well, not only that, but make me look like an asshole in front of my boss because your product didn't live up to its promises, and we have a big problem.
That is a good point.
Yeah. We have a big.
We can beat up on that all day. I mean, maybe we should do that as another topic. We'll peel that one off, absolutely. But I hope the
champion versus coach. I think that's a good topic to have.
So the nut of it, right? So we covered medic in detail, and I know Keith, you're gonna wrap it up, but just even in this 20, 25, 30 minutes. There is a lot more to selling than people give credit to. I hope people appreciate that. And that's why, as much as both Keith and I stray away from it, it's always attractive to come back because it is, it's not simple. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of science to it and a lot to understand. And it's actually pretty fun. So.
Yeah. Understanding the frameworks is good too. And really, I wanted to talk about frameworks. We ended up just spending time only talking about one, and that was medic. There's multiple sales frameworks out there that we could get into, and maybe we'll have those for another episode. Because I think this was a good discussion on medic, and it's an important discussion to have because there's a lot of SEs that have no idea what
I attribute all my success to this sales framework methodology. I genuinely, no lie, do.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you can speak the same vocabulary as sales leaders, it definitely makes your life a lot easier, right? As an SE. So at the very least, like just understanding the different sales frameworks and vocabulary from them, super helpful. Even if they're never implemented, at least the framework, but having that vocabulary really makes those conversations easier. At least it has for me. Well, this has been a great episode. Medic is an interesting topic. Like I said, John knows a ton. I think we're just really hitting the tip of this iceberg.
We can spiral
when it comes to what
on the big D.
What we could talk about.
Those two big D's right there, baby. We can take it deep.
Those two big D's just smacking you in the face. And with that, we'll see you next week on Altar of the Demo Gods.